to seize attention, sharpen messaging, and own their niche through top podcast appearances with unmatched expertise in digital marketing and AI. He's helped thousands expand their reach and influence. And Tony will share in his presentation tonight how to use the power of AI in identifying and reaching your ideal market, how to refine your messaging for maximum impact, how to use AI to scale relationships through guest interviews, enhances networking, personalized outreach, builds deeper trust-based connections, how to leverage AI to expand marketing reach, and understanding the intersection of influence, relationship, and leverage, and how these three elements work together to drive sustainable business growth. Let's give a warm welcome to Tony Guarnaccia. Woo! Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Yeah, thank you. This is all right. Perfect. All right. Well, I hope everyone gets a lot of value out of this. I think hopefully it'll open your eyes to some things I'm going to talk about today, because it's not just about prompts. I didn't want to make it here's a million prompts. I wanted to actually give something unique. So this is kind of my unique take on this. So really what we're going to talk about today is how AI is revolutionizing media. And what does that mean for all of us in this room? And so before we get into that, let's actually define what media is and really kind of look at it through a lens of 4 different dimensions. So first of all, you have the application, right? What's the format? How is this being presented? Secondly, you have the consumption. How is it being consumed? How are people adopting this media? Then you have the creation. How is it actually getting created? Who's creating it? How's it being produced? And then you have distribution. Where is it going? And so what you're going to discover today is that AI is fundamentally changing the rules on all of this. And so let's look at what I call the media revolution. Like, how is this changing? Because I think when you look at things over time, it gives a really interesting perspective. And so back in the day, actually before my day even, you had publishing, right? What did they publish? Well, this is back when newspapers were popular, and you had magazines, and people would write. You had writers, and then you, on the consumption side, you had subscribers. They'd be subscribing to this media. Then the next stage is broadcast media. This is where you have production, producers. And you would have receivers. Literally, if you're old enough to remember this, you would literally have receivers. There'd be an antenna, and you get your content through that, and you still have it in the car, say, right, the radio. That would be receivers. The next iteration is really where you started getting websites. And there was things like directories, which was like Yahoo. Then you had search engines, Alta Vista, and then eventually the king of them all, which still rules today in this space, is Google. And it was all about optimizing my content. I have to take my content, I have to optimize it, and people, the consumers, are going to find it. Then, of course, you had posting, right? That's when it was about social media. You have followers. People were consuming it based on who you were. And then now, today, we're entering a different era. This is the generative era, where the content is being generated automatically, leveraging AI. People are also consuming content differently. And so if you look at kind of the interest economy, if you go back far enough, you can look at Amazon. They started dipping into this, right? You bought this product, you might be interested in this other product. And now Spotify will do the same thing. Hey, you're interested in this, or before that, Pandora, right? You like this, perhaps you might like this other thing. And then, of course, what do we have today? TikTok, at least for now in the United States. TikTok really changed the game. And so it's really not about your following anymore. It's really about your content and what is the quality of that, and how can people discover what they like. And that's why those apps are so addictive, right? And so that's kind of how things are changing. But why does this matter? Because it changes everything. So if we contrast kind of traditional media and AI-generated media, like, what does this mean for us? And what do we do about it, more importantly? Well, traditional media used to be difficult. If anyone remembers actually writing a blog post, it wasn't so easy. Now I take it for granted. It hasn't even been that long, right? But now I can create content pretty easily. But that also means that what used to be expensive, so you look at how do you equate effort, right, or creation? There's usually time, there's effort, and there's money. All that has changed with AI. What used to be expensive is now cheap. And so because of that, you can create tremendous leverage. And how do you grow and scale quickly? Leverage is the key to scale. It also changes how people interact. So as I mentioned before, it used to be about how many followers you have. Now, the algorithms are all about your engagement rate. Are people consuming it? Because you can have 0 followers. If you have something that's viral, you can still get a lot of exposure. And that's shifted. So it used to be about the creator. Now it's about the content they created. So it's totally changing that, which also means it's not about the creator, and it's not about the creation. It's going to be about distribution. So think about it. If anyone can create content instantly, inexpensively, quickly, the game changes, and it's always been this way. But distribution is really going to be king now. It's going to be even more important because if anyone can create it, there's only so many places on the top of Google. Or if you look at where the media is going, maybe you're using Perplexity, which is the AI search engine, or Claude, or OpenAI. If someone puts in your name or your expertise, are you to be found there? That's something you want to think about. And then finally, my personal belief is that as things get more automated, we're moving from transactional to more relational media. So your relationships are really what's going to separate you. So having good relationships are going to be extremely important. And so all this is really important because media is really the key to growing 3 things. Growing your influence, which really directly impacts your impact, and ultimately your income. So if you have a business, you really want to look at where is media going. And so with all this, that's what I need to say here is that influence is, unfortunately, never been more difficult to obtain. And the reason why is kind of threefold. 1, fragmentation. So if you look at that chart I had in the media revolution, if you go back, newspaper, there was just a few conglomerates. Then you have the web revolution, right? A lot more websites. Then you get into social media. So everything is getting fragmented, meaning there's more content, and there's more places to consume that content, meaning marketing channels. It's also more technology dependent, right? So if you don't have an idea, thankfully everyone in this room is probably on the cutting edge, but if you are not aware with where technology is going, you're just simply going to get left behind. So that's another issue. And then finally, it's cluttered. So once you actually find a channel that has success, and say you do have a business, chances are your competitors have found out the same thing. So then you want to figure out, okay, I found a channel that works. How do I actually differentiate myself with a unique message that breaks through the clutter? And so at the end of this, you want to think about, okay, how do you grow your influence? So I'll tell you what I've tried. I've tried everything. I've done landing pages. I've done ad campaigns. Over the years, I've spent literally hundreds of millions of dollars in ads. I've done VSLs. I've done, speaking engagements like this. And also, oops, for some reason it's not coming up. My thing is stuck. Why is that? Oops. And I've written books. There you go. I don't know why they didn't come up. So then I thought, okay, is there an easier way? Like, this is an awful lot of effort to put all this together and get virtually no results. And so that's when I discovered why I call the Swiss Army knife of marketing. Why is it the Swiss Army knife of marketing? Because it has leverage. So leverage, again, is a key to having success. So this is not a political statement. This is a marketing statement. So regardless on which side you lean, it's pretty much indisputable that podcasting had a tremendous impact on the elections. And if you look at historically, they've always been a precursor, right? Obama did very well because of social media. He really was one of the first to take advantage of that. If you go all the way back to Kennedy, Kennedy did a great job with television. And so the reason why I'm pointing this out, because I believe guest interviews they've been around for a while, but they're one of the best opportunities today. And specifically, why do I call it the Swiss Army knife of marketing? Because it does so many things. So if you look at it, you can do a guest interview and simultaneously grow your visibility, meaning you're tapping into someone else's audience, which you didn't pay for. So a podcast already has an established audience. You being a guest on a show gives you exposure into that audience. It's also powerful because it's credibility. What are you doing? You're transferring that authority from the host to yourself, just like me. You automatically have some level of trust just because I'm up here and because she had me invited, because she's transferring her platform to me right now. And so it's the same way it works on podcasts. Then you have relationships. It's a relational medium. Remember how I mentioned how things are going to be moving to relationships? Well, there's two relationships you're building. You're building one with the host, which is very valuable because you can leverage that for collaborations. I've literally created business partners that have podcast interviews. I've done what's called joint ventures, affiliate arrangements, very, very powerful. And then finally, you can use it for generating income. So when you have those collaborations, the other audience. The relationship, of course, is with the host, but then you're also building a relationship with the listeners because it's one of the few mediums where someone's listening to you for an hour. So they're in their car, they're jogging, whatever they're doing. You have them for basically a whole span of time. Very rare because if you're looking at running Facebook ads, Google ads, virtually any other channel, it's a very short period of time that you're getting that exposure. So that's one thing I love about it. And so what I personally found is guest interviews are the fastest way to grow your influence, your impact, and ultimately your income. And so the other nice thing about this, it's very low cost. So all you need is a microphone, video cameras, super helpful, although some are just audio-based. Internet connection, most of us, I think, probably have that, I hope. And then finally, if you're, it's good to have it recorded. You can record on your end. You can leverage the host recording most of the time. And so what I'm going to teach you is one system I've developed to help you grow your influence through podcast interviews. And it works regardless if nobody knows who you are. So a lot of people think you have to have a huge following to be a guest on a podcast. Absolutely not true. You don't have to have experience speaking even or a social media following. None of that is necessary. And I really believe it's the biggest opportunity because, again, you can kind of see the world shifting towards more relational, more authenticity. If everything's AI generated, what do you believe? And so if you have a business, there is a lot of money you can make from this as well, and I explain how that will work. So how do you tap into this? Well, we're going to cover how AI is leveraged to identify and reach your ideal market. Then we're going to look at refining your messaging for maximum impact. That's one of the most powerful things you can do is really consider how you're communicating. So we're going to look at that. How do you scale relationships through guest interviews? And then how to leverage AI to expand your marketing reach so you can exponentially grow your following by doing this. And then really the intersection between these three things, your influence, your relationships, and how do you create leverage. So here's a couple of reasons people don't do this, because I always like to look at kind of the contrast. And so why don't people interview? They don't have the time, or they don't think they have the time. No idea where to start. Don't want to look silly. So what if I look stupid up there, don't say the right thing? Hopefully I'm not doing that now. Can't seem to find the right tools or systems. And the biggest reason I found is it can take a lot of time. And so I'm going to show you how to save time doing this. And really, the idea is to use AI to completely automate the entire process. And so it's a new approach. It's how you grow your influence. And I love the easy button. I don't know if anyone remembers that Staples commercial. Very impactful in marketing, and it's a brilliant thing. And so that's what it's got to be. It's got to be easy. And only take a few minutes, so not a lot of time. And so this is a system I use to get on lots of very large podcasts and a lot of small ones too. It can be all different sizes. And it's helped me grow my audience impact. So I have different businesses. I have an agency, software companies, marketplaces, all sorts of things. But podcasting is a common thread across all of them. And so you need 3 steps. So you first need to know, how do I get booked on the podcast? How do I find the right ones for me? then you need to know how do you create an impact. So you could be in the most amazing podcast or the most amazing stage, but you could totally flub it if you don't know what to say. So I'm going to show you what to do for that. And then ultimately, how do you leverage this to grow your influence further than just that podcast interview? And so where do you start? I'm going to show you two versions of this. I'm going to show you how to manually do it. So you could go out and do this entirely on your own. I also have a software company that does this, that automates the whole process, but I don't want to be one of those jerks that just says, like, get my stuff. I'm going to show you how to do it manually. That way, if you need to, you can do that as well. So we're going to talk about how to find the podcast, how to 10x the impact of the podcast, and then how to grow your audience from there. And so let's get into it. So how to quickly find the podcast. So the first thing you want to think about, okay, how do you grow your audience? I think we've already established that. The secret is really media. Podcasting is one kind of media. This is another kind of media, in a sense. Virtual summits, Google advertising. There's lots of kinds of media. This one's focused on podcast interviews. So how do you find the podcast that will interview you? Well, there's a few things you can do. What I suggest when you get started, because you're just getting used to this, is tap into your network. I guarantee you there's someone that has a podcast in this room today. Actually, that's easy because I have a podcast. But besides for myself, I'm sure there's someone here that has a podcast. Then you have communities. If you're in a local community, another fantastic way to find podcast interview opportunities. There's directories out there. There's agencies out there. And there's also search. You can use basic searches. And so what I find is when you find and know what to look for, it's actually pretty easy to find the podcast that will be a right fit for you. And so how do you search for those podcasts? Well, in the past, what I've done is I go to Google, I come up with special search phrases, and that was one of the most effective ways I could find the podcasts. But the problem with that was it wouldn't have any criteria. So it wouldn't tell me how long have they been running, because a lot of podcasts, unfortunately, quit. It wouldn't tell me how many episodes they've done. It wouldn't show any kind of details about their level of influence. And so what I decided was, can I make software that can kind of automate that entire process? And that's where Guestify was born. So this whole concept I have came out of this. And so what's the easiest way to find podcasts that will interview you? That's where my tool came in, which I call the Podcast Prospector. And with this, it gives you criteria. And so this is something you want to pay attention to, because aside from the software, this is something you want to qualify, you want to use to qualify the shows you want to be on, regardless if you use the software or not. And so you want to look at how many interviews have they done. So is this the first one they've done, or have they been doing this for a while? If they're new, that's actually not bad if you're new, right? If you're just first time being on a podcast and they have 5 interviews, probably not much risk there. If it's a big show, maybe wait until you have a little bit more experience. Then you want to think about, okay, here's a crazy idea. Actually go listen to the show. It's really annoying as a podcaster when people reach out to you that have never heard the show. So it's always a good idea to actually listen to any show that you're interested in. It's good to read the description. You want to get an idea of what category it's in. You want to get an idea of the total number of episodes they've done, as I mentioned. When was their last episode? So a lot of podcasts, unfortunately, quit, which is called pod fade. So you want to make sure they're still active. And then you want to make sure that they actually do guest interviews. Some shows don't. And so this is just some of the criteria you want to do. And in terms of qualification, a great place to start is if there's an existing relationship. You want to see what is their reach. So how impactful would they be on the message you want to communicate? How relevant are they to what you're doing? Are they still running? And then finally, what kind of reviews they have. And so this is just some kind of quick criteria. What I like to do, kind of a hack, is look for someone like you. So say you have a book that's launching. One of the most powerful things you can do is simply go and look for other authors like yourself and search for them. Because chances are they paid an expensive podcast booking agency thousands of dollars a month. Instead of doing all the research and paying that money, why not just go on the same shows they had and maybe give a contrarian point of view? So that's one of the easiest things that you can do. So you can look for events they've been at. You can look on social media. You can look at those authors. Like Amazon's a fantastic place to research. And then there's also directories of speakers. And then finally, you want to pitch. So I won't go into too much detail here, but you want to make it a personal introduction, not an automated one. I can't stand the automated ones. You want to make sure if they have a submission page, you use that. You go to the contact page. Go to their social media is another great way. One of the most effective things that's worked for me for going on shows is to use LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is one of the best ways to do outreach, which I know a few of us are doing that. So it's very, very powerful. And then you want to, last option is to do email. And email works very well too. Most, in fact, are made by email. And so that's kind of the process. What my system does is we look at your podcasts, we look at your one sheet, which is your content, your messaging, and then we automate the process by combining those two. So it's a one-to-one personalized message. And then you want to send it over time. Usually there's an initial pitch, you follow up. I think, who was I talking over here? They're in sales. So, right, in sales, you got to follow up. Same thing here, you want to follow up with your pitches because you're selling yourself. And so I have a pitch template. If anybody wants it, send me a message on LinkedIn. I'll give you my contact information. I'm happy to send out the templates that I've used. And so the idea, regardless of how you're doing it, you want to position yourself as the go-to expert in your niche. And you do that by solving specific problems that your audience has. And then you want to customize that message for that particular host. And so here's a prompt you can use. Create a pitch for getting booked on a podcast for an interview based on this podcast pitch template, which again, I'll send it to you. I will provide information about the podcast, similar episodes, as well as my guest biography and topics so that you can customize this message. So that's the first stage, which is where you find the podcast where you want to be a guest. Now, this next lesson is how do you grow your impact? Now, these are some of the lessons I wish I'd learned a long time ago because they really make a huge difference when you're communicating. And so what do the greatest speakers have in common? Anyone, if anyone wants to answer, feel free. What do they have in common? Great speakers. Kind of, yes? Yeah, great listeners. That's definitely one. Great storytellers. That, I really like that one. Charisma. Very good. Anyone else? Well, kind of the easy answer is they're great communicators. In fact, I would venture to say that being able to clearly communicate your message is really the most critical skill you can develop as a guest, or really in anything else, because whether you're doing sales, whether you're trying to convince your kids to go to bed, how you communicate is really a deal maker. It's really what changes everything. In fact, your impact. Most of us, a lot of us, are in business to make an impact, right? And so that transformation, taking someone from where they are to where they want to be, that is also true when you're communicating. Hopefully by the end of this message, you'll have some little bit of a transformation in your life and maybe have an idea of, okay, this is what I need to do. Your influence is determined by the impact. If you can't communicate the influence, the impact, it's not going to have it's going to make any difference. You got the cure for cancer, but if you can't communicate properly, it's not going to go anywhere. So this is immensely important. So how do you communicate your message? So what I used to do is, before AI, try to brainstorm, use Google Docs, copy, paste, brainstorm, and I'm a marketer. I had the hardest time writing like my biography and my intro. I didn't know where to start. And so that's when I thought, okay, in the software, can I add the automation of creation of the content and the messaging? And so that's when the message builder was born. And so this is the formula for creating an impactful message. There's really three things you want to think about. And I'm going to tailor this, again, for being a guest on a podcast. But the first thing is really your authority hook. This is your unique positioning. How you position yourself in any room or in any context is very, very important. Then you have your impact intro. So this really establishes your mission and the results you've driven for others. And then finally, your value. Why would someone work with you as opposed to anyone else or doing nothing at all? And so at the end of the day, what you want to do is become the trusted authority in your niche. And so how do you do that? Well, the authority hook is a great place to start. So the first thing you want to think about is who are you serving? And the more specific you can be, the better. So if you say you serve everybody, chances are you serve nobody. So the more specific you can be, and for instance, in our system, you can personalize it per podcast. And so, for instance, over the years, I've done a lot with marketing. I have done a lot with podcasting, with guest interviews. I used to be a professional violinist. It's kind of like a resume. You don't want to, I haven't applied for a job in a while, but what you don't want to do is have a resume that's kind of vanilla. Ideally, you would apply that resume to that specific job. You change the intro, change a little bit of your background. Same thing here. You want to make sure you have a personalized message to that specific audience and segment. The second thing you want to think about is, what is the problem you're trying to solve? When do they need you? When would they call you for help? Then you have to think about, okay, what results have I driven for others? Again, that transformation. If you can't communicate what you've done for others, they're going to have a really hard time understanding what you do. And then finally, how are you doing it? What is your process? What is your system? What is your software? What makes it unique that you do as opposed to anyone else? And so when you combine these, you can create what's called an authority hook. So this is the formula. And again, this is hugely valuable right here. So for instance, I might say something like, I help 7-figure entrepreneurs that might struggle to compete and differentiate themselves because nobody knows who they are, to be known and set apart so that they can grow their influence, income, and impact using the only system dedicated to marketing and monetizing a podcast through guest interviews. So this is one of the most powerful formulas. I like to think in frameworks and formulas because it makes everything easier. But this essentially is a prompt. So I think I wrote this. I think someone's asked me, are these slides new? This one's like 10 years old because I had come up with this concept way before prompting. But essentially, this is a prompt. So here's essentially what you want to do. So I'd go home if I were you. This is a great one to screen capture, or not screen capture, but take a picture of. So who do you help? What is that audience? When do they need you? Like, what problem are you solving? What are you doing for them? What results have they gotten? And how are you doing it? So this is a formula that we use in the software. So again, reiterating what I said before, I'm not going to go over it again. And then the next thing you want to think about, okay, you have authority, but why do people care? Like, how do you resonate with an audience where they feel like they know you? And I think someone over here had mentioned stories. That's actually one of the best ways to do it. Sometimes you can't always tell a story, so you want to resonate with what I call the impact intro. So this is looking at where, like what results have you gotten, and again, looking at why. This is your mission. So if you communicate why you're doing something, it could be much more powerful than if it's left out of your messaging. And so your why is actually one of the best places to incorporate your story. So this might be your founder's story, like why did you start this company in the first place? It might be a client story. So how have you transformed their lives? Maybe it was someone that really had a challenging time, and then there was a transformation. That is the why. That is how you resonate with an audience, by telling a story. I would tell stories here if I had time, but I want to make sure I get through all the content. And so from the where and why, from the example I gave you, so my where might be with a proven system that has grown 10,000 small businesses and a dozen Fortune 500 companies. And why, this could be a mission statement, in this case it is. My mission is to make podcasting profitable, as an example. And then finally, you want to create your messaging. So from a podcast guest perspective, there's really 3 things you want to think about from your messaging. The first one is your biography. And so within our software, we built a tool that will build your biographies. It could be used for LinkedIn. It could be used for anything. This one's used for, I like to use it for podcast appearances. Then you have your intro. So how is someone going to introduce you? Just like I was introduced up here. Very important component to all this. And then finally, your tagline. So ideally, when you're thinking about messaging, you want to think about, okay, how can this be communicated in a few paragraphs? How can it be communicated in a single paragraph? How can it be communicated in a sentence? And how can it be communicated in just a few words or even one word? And so that is a tagline. And so AI is actually fantastic at this because you can feed it and it can break it down. And so I built that in the software, but just as easily you could use prompts to do the same thing. Take this biography I created and simplify it down into a short sentence or 2. And so here's an example of the software, but here's the prompt as well. Create a guest expert biography for getting booked for podcast interviews based on my authority hook, which I defined already, and the impact intro frameworks. And so if you don't have the frameworks, which hopefully you took the picture, but if you don't, then it would just be the who, what, where, why, how, etc. And then finally, you want to communicate your value. So anytime you're somewhere, you want to think about value. So the value I'm providing here is really my content and the knowledge I've learned over 25 years of doing this. When you're on a podcast, however, it's a little bit different because it's a little bit more structured, because it's a dialogue typically, which goes back to that relationship building. So the first area you're adding value is what topics are you going to talk about? So if you want to get booked on the show in the first place, you want to fill in gaps where they don't have knowledge, like topics. And a lot of people are talking about AI, so they're looking for guest speakers in AI. So if you have an AI startup that's kind of new, people love to hear about that. So those are topics. The second thing is the questions you can answer. So if you can answer questions that no one else has answered before, or have a unique perspective that no one else has had before, that is very engaging. And then finally, your offers. So a lot of times, podcast hosts are looking to generate revenue. So if you have an affiliate-based product, that's a great thing to do as an offer. But even if you're not trying to make money and the host isn't trying to make money, maybe you just want to get leads, or maybe you just want to establish your authority in a space, your offer might be a checklist, it might be a guide, it might be a prompt, it might be a screen capture of like a graphic like I have here. Those are how you add value to the audience. And so you can use AI for this as well. So suggest interview topics and questions based on my authority hook. In this case, you don't use your impact intro because it's not really relevant. Like, it doesn't care about your mission or your results. This is all about the audience. So what is the audience looking for? What kind of transformation are they trying to obtain? But the same thing can work for your offers. So you can then say, okay, what lead magnets would be fantastic for this avatar as well, this audience? So that's the topics, questions, and offers. And then what's powerful about this system? It's really, hopefully if you learn one thing out of this, what I'm teaching here is actually not about podcasts or guest interviews. It kind of is, but it's way broader than that, because you can use this messaging, yes, in your podcast interviews, but also on your website. Like, you want to make sure you have alignment with what you're saying on a podcast with what's on your website, what's on your LinkedIn profile. Consistency is very important. So you want to use that same messaging on your website, in your social media, in your advertising, in your intros and pitches, and in your media kit or your one sheet. So I'm going to skip through this part. So that's kind of the second one. Now the last one is looking at, well, let's see if we can answer this question. What do the greatest brands have in common? So if there's a brand that we know, like Nike or Apple or anything like that, any commonality, anyone have any ideas on what that might be? Yes? Yep, that's a good answer. Okay, anyone else? Any ideas? Let's get some engagement. I think we need more coffee here too. Yes? Yep, that's a good one. Okay, anyone else?
They know how to get the attention of their target market.
Ooh, I like that one. I think you might have heard me speak before. Well, what I'm going to say, in my opinion, one of the greatest qualities is omnipresence. So they seem to be everywhere within that market. And so being omnipresent is really a critical part to being kind of the market. So I'm talking about the market leaders, the ones that are the most impactful. And so you want to think about who knows you. So if you want to be establishing a market, like, who actually knows you and who cares, right? And so the reason why this is important if you're a business owner is because money follows attention. When you have someone's attention, ultimately the money will follow. And unfortunately, and this has always been a pet peeve of mine, like until the light bulb went off, but I was always like, okay, that guy over there, he's not half as good as I am at marketing. How come he got the promotion? Or how come he has the business? How come he won the contract? Because it's not always the best. A lot of times, unfortunately, the way the world is, the best known usually beats the best. And so what can we do about that? Well, let's look at what omnipresence is. This is like being everywhere. So this is why you have Starbucks and McDonald's on every stinking corner, because they want to be omnipresent. Because they know, even if they're every block, like in New York City, they're getting more attention, they're getting more dollars. So omnipresence is when your audience feels like you're everywhere within your niche. And so it's kind of like a movie release. So if you look at the Avenger movies, they seem to be everywhere. And they're usually promoting it ahead of time, 6 months ahead of time at the Super Bowl. They're spending a lot of money. And so you want to think about how can you spread your message everywhere without the $200 million budget that Disney has? And how do you do it for free? Well, that's what we're going to talk about next. So if you remember way back when, at the very beginning of the presentation, I was talking about the media revolution. Well, we're going to tie it back to that now. And so a couple of the pillars of this was, okay, creation. How do you create content? How do you distribute that content? And then how do you amplify that content? That's where AI really shines. And so how do you create content? So we talked about guest interviews, one of the best ways to do it. They help you increase your visibility. They help you establish that credibility and trust we talked about. They can be used to drive traffic to your website or your promotion. They're fantastic at growing your email list and getting leads. And one of the most important things is they build authentic relationships. So again, if you look at where AI is going, everyone's going to have an AI avatar. Like, how do you know it's real? So my personal opinion is live events like this are going to be more popular. So there's kind of a duality to this, right? The more AI is, the more easy it is to create content, the more people are going to want authentic conversations and know it's the real you. And ultimately, it can be used to drive more sales of your products and services. So how do you produce this content? Well, the first thing that's really powerful about this is you can leverage someone else's audience. So I always love, I mean, I've spent a lot of money in ads over the years. My favorite thing is to not spend a lot of money in ads. Why not just tap into someone else's audience that's already done all that legwork and spent all that money? And so that's one thing that podcasts enable you to do, because once you're on their show, you're automatically getting distributed to all the major podcast outlets like Spotify, Apple, Amazon. If they have a video-based podcast, you get on YouTube, you get on Shorts. And so that's what I love about it. And so if you look at the two things, you have content creation and you have content distribution. Content creation, I like to think in the different formats. So you have video, you have audio, you have text, and you have graphics. The more, all things considered, the more kinds of formats you can publish in, the more of an impact you can have. And the beauty of this is actually incredibly easy now with AI, because you can just literally feed in the transcript, it'll output your blog post, it'll output your email, it'll output graphics now. Like literally just this week, ChatGPT came out with the graphic capabilities, well, they've had them for a little while, but much better capabilities. And so now is a wonderful time to take advantage of this because you can automate virtually every component of it. So how do you grow your audience? So the next step is, okay, I have the content creation done. That's actually a piece of cake because of AI. Now how do I exponentially grow my audience? And so what you want to think about is there's three kinds of audience. There's earned media, which is the media you don't pay for. Being on a podcast is earned media. Me being up on this stage is essentially earned media. PR is earned media. Then you have owned media. This is content that you control. This is your website. This is your blog. This is your newsletter, your email, etc. And then there's paid media. So you can accelerate a lot of this if you do want to spend money on it. So for instance, you could have a Facebook post promoting an event and then throw some ad dollars at it. So that's an example of how you use paid media. And so how do you get exposure on other platforms? So these are some of the different things you can do. You can distribute via video, so you can repost it. So you can a lot of times podcasters will give you the video, the raw video. You can repurpose that a million different ways, chop it up. I'm sure a lot of us have seen the short form videos. You can turn that into email. You can turn it into social media posts. Earned media, you can do what's called co-marketing. So I did co-marketing for this. So Sharon invited me on this, and I promoted it to my list, and vice versa. So that's co-marketing, because we're both benefiting from that. You can do SEO. It's really limited what you can do. So that's kind of the second component. And then the last part is, how do you create leverage? So remember I mentioned that leverage is the key to scale. Well, how do you amplify your messaging? This is where compounding comes in. So content compounding. So you can 10x your content. So once you have that raw feed, now you can multiply it. And so I kind of think of it like Thanksgiving leftovers, right? Everyone loves the leftovers after Thanksgiving. Like, how do you turn this into, all of a sudden the turkey is like a turkey sandwich, and then you're having it in soup, and you're having all these different combinations. Same way to think about I grew up Italian, right? So lots of different ways to eat the food. So anyway, that's kind of how that works. So compounding is when you effortlessly amplify your reach by multiplying your content through automation. And so the old way of creating content would be you have an idea, you'd be like, okay, I gotta shoot a video for this. I have this other idea, I'm gonna grow a piece of content for this. I have this other idea, I'm gonna create a graphic for it. Why do that when now you can just do one thing, like a podcast interview, have someone ask all the questions you want to answer, and then you create all the content around it. That's what compounding is. So you're taking the different formats, and at the center of this is that interview. Or, I mean, this is an interview discussion, but it could be any kind of podcast. It could be a solo episode, it doesn't matter. Or it could just be a YouTube video, it doesn't matter. The concept is the same. Basically, you're taking your content and you're amplifying your impact by using it in multiple ways. And so how do you do this? So what I do usually, just to give you some ideas, I'll take that interview and I'll turn it into a blog post. Actually, I create really cool software with this, with AI, speaking of AI. So I created, and as an experiment, I used, I think, OpenAI like a year ago to create a WordPress plugin that automatically takes the interview and creates a blog post every time. And so that's kind of an aside, but it's really cool what you can do with AI for coding. If you're not a coder, you don't have to be a coder. You can do things like that. So that's one idea of how I did it. You can use it to create images. You can use audiograms, which are kind of out of fashion, but they're still kind of cool to create. This is where you have video, kind of a still image. It's video, but you have audio kind of running in the background. You can do quote cards. Quote cards are great. So if you say something pithy, then you want to make sure you capture that. And that becomes your IP because it's unique to you. You can use it for show notes, discussion, so you can repost it. You can use it in social media posts. You can use video micro content, so chop it up, do horizontal, vertical content. And then, yeah, those are probably the most popular use cases. And so when you do this, what I mean by compounding is you take that one interview, you have the host distributing it for you. So we already talked about this. It's going to all the podcasting platforms. Then it's going to all these properties. So properties are like owned properties. So you can take that podcast, it's on your website. You know, it's or on their website. It's on their, you know, a lot of times they'll email for it. It could be search engine optimized. So there's another win. Then you're taking it, or they're taking it and putting it on social media. So they take it, they publicize it on LinkedIn, Facebook, et cetera, and then you want to do the same yourselves. So where this becomes powerful is you just did 1 hour, if that, of work. Now you have all this content, and it's not just you doing it. They're promoting it too. So you get a tremendous compounding effect because so much is happening with very little effort. And that's what I love about this. You're creating leverage, which is powerful. So this is, again, some ideas. You can use it for YouTube, TikTok, audiograms, audio transcription, blog posts, emails, show notes, video descriptions, social media posts, episode art, video thumbnails, which are really cool now with ChatGPT. Very easy to do. If you want to learn about that, ask me after. Episode promotion, guest promotion, quote cards. So there's a lot you can do with this. So it saved me a lot of time. So now, as a business owner, don't need the graphic designer, don't need the copywriter, don't need the web designer, the social media specialist, virtual assistant, or the project manager to keep track of all this. Now with AI, this is basically all automated. So that's it. Those are the 3 things we looked at. We looked at how to quickly find those podcasts where you can have impact and where they want to have you as a guest. We looked at how to actually have an impact once you go on those shows, and that is through your messaging, having that authority hook, having the impact intro, and then ultimately adding value through your topics, offers, and questions. And then finally, we looked at how to quickly grow your audience through the marketing. So really, there's 4 M's. You have the media, which in this case is the guest interview. Then you have the messaging, so what are you going to say once you get on there? Then you have the marketing, how do I market this? And then the 4th M, which I didn't get time to get into today, is monetization. How do you actually make money off of this? And so that's basically the system. Happy to answer any questions. I also have a QR code where I have a challenge where I help you get booked on 3 interviews in 3 days. In that challenge, I also talk about the 4th M, which is how to monetize it. So there's 3 ways to monetize. You can convert directly the audience or the host. You can do collaborations, which is actually the best way. And then the last one is, you can get referrals. There's different ways to get referrals. which is easy because you're not having to be sleazy or salesy. So that's the system in a nutshell. Happy to answer any questions. Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, sure.
So I was just going to ask, so were you saying that you can use Valley to make thumbnails? Is that what you said? Like YouTube thumbnails?
OpenAI, they just came out with the latest image update, and you can use that to create YouTube thumbnails, and it's very, very good. Because they finally figured out how to do text in OpenAI. Yeah, it's very easy, very quick. Yes? I use a whole slew of them. If I want to do, well, my favorite is Claude by far. Claude, I think, is the best one. That's super helpful if you want to design something, if you want to code quickly, if you want to write. It's fantastic. OpenAI, I use quite a bit too. Now I'm going to use it more with the image capabilities. I really like that one. Deep research, I'll use it for that. Like, I find OpenAI is really good for competitive intelligence. So say you want to enter a new market and you want to analyze all the competitors, but you don't want to do all the work. So if you've done any kind of strategic planning, it can be a lot of money, it can be a lot of time, a lot of headache. Now with deep research, that can automate a lot of that. And then sometimes for search, to kind of get a perspective, like if I'm buying, so I did actually the show here at the Capital Factory, the Startup Crawl. And I needed a backdrop, and I kind of was late to the party doing it. I should have planned ahead earlier. And also, I didn't want to spend a lot of money. So I used Perplexity to research it for me, and it found me one for like $50 that I got in like a week. And so Perplexity is fantastic if you're looking for a car or trade show materials or whatever. If you're doing research on a product and you have lots of options, and it's a semi-commoditized market, I really like Perplexity. Yes. Sure.
So, Guestify.AI, is that a proprietary software, or what? I mean, are you combining different?
No, I built it. Yeah, I was out of my own frustration. So it's got three main components. It's got the search engine. So we have about 5 million podcasts in that. And then it's got the message builder, which creates your content, because as a marketer, it makes me cringe when people send pitches that aren't good, or if they're on a podcast, they don't know how to communicate. And so I put that in there. And then there's also a CRM to manage the relationship, because a lot of people either don't have a process or they use a CRM. But a CRM, of course, is for managing customer relationships. This is for managing collaborations. So if you want to collaborate with someone, it's a relationship. It's really not a sales effort. And so I built a CRM for that specifically. Actually, some of the software I built with AI, that's a whole other topic. But it's really cool what you can create with AI if you want to go quickly. Yes.
Do you think podcasts are the primary growth engine to promote your own brand?
I think it's one of the best ways to build your personal brand. Yeah, because you're building relationships, and so relationships are ultimately what open doors. And so you're building relationships, you're building credibility, you're tapping into someone else's audience. Those are great levers. If you want to go quickly, grow quickly, advertising is one of the best ways to do it. A lot of people don't have the money to do that, and you're still missing, even with ads, you're missing the credibility component. Podcasting, I think, is a great foundation no matter what you want to do or what level of scale or what your funding is. Other questions? Yes.
As someone that works with a number of small, medium businesses, startups, and small marketing agencies even, I'm wondering, my question is, when it comes to content distribution across various social media channels or managing those inboxes, especially for the small teams that are just beginning the journey, like you said, going from content all the way through, do you have any recommendations for them?
For creating content, well, again, not to be a dead horse, but I think podcasting is a great way to do it. Like interviews, we talked about interviews, but podcasts are also great. Personally, what I do for a content strategy for myself, what I'm working on, is kind of like a pyramid, three components to it. So if I was to advise, actually I do advise some companies on this, because I still do some fractional consulting. But if I was to create a content strategy, I'd layer three things together. I would have a YouTube strategy, where I'm posting once a day for 5 days a week. That's really powerful for getting the search engines, and it would be for very specific search terms or questions that your market has, because that can be used in your sales funnel to answer objections. It can be used to drive traffic awareness. And so if you have a really good content strategy, you have that. And that can be automated a lot with AI. But you're missing the authenticity part. This is where the podcast comes in. So you then do a weekly podcast. And then the last part would be a newsletter, because you want to be growing your email list, because that's the one thing you own. So just look at TikTok. Here today, gone tomorrow. Any other channel, or they could blacklist you, whatever. The email list is the most valuable thing you have because you own it. And so you want to create email. But again, one of my rules or principles is you want to create leverage. So what you can do now is you take your podcast interviews, your YouTube interviews, your podcast, and that becomes your newsletter content. So you're not really doing any extra effort. And then all that can then ultimately be repurposed, leveraging AI to create your social media content, all in the 4 formats, right? The 4 modalities of video, audio, graphics, and text. You can automate all that. So that's really the power of AI, and where you get a leverage and you get a flywheel by leveraging the AI. Does that answer your question?
Not really. It seems like you highlight the importance of building a content pipeline instead of being on any particular technology to automate posting.
Correct, yeah. I think too many people take a technology-first approach. I think you want to take a content-first approach, and ideally what you want to do is create a content calendar, and underpinning that content calendar is a promotion calendar. So here's what I want to promote, here's my new products, here's my offers. That's the foundation. Then on top of that, you build your content, how you're going to promote that, and then after that, you have the distribution. So again, those 3, you have the content creation, distribution, and amplification, but at the bottom of that is the content strategy, which is your content calendar and your promotion calendar. Or promotion calendar and then your content calendar. You're welcome. Yes?
I think we need to wind down.
Sure.
You gotta start clearing people out.
Yeah.
People may want to ask more questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
So we're gonna end it now.
Awesome.
And if you need to talk to Tony, we can continue out the hallway, and we got about 5 more minutes in here.
Sure. Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you, everyone.
For my question, it might benefit
Yeah,
everyone.
go for it.
Okay, sure.
Next 2 steps to implement this, not 200. Next 2 steps without crossing a boundary that you may have seen where people misuse this and it ended up backfiring on them.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing you want to do is I would look for the podcast where you might be a good fit and kind of listen to those to see who else has been on it, and then figure out what your messaging would be to that. So who do you want to really solidify? Who are you serving? What's the transformation? All those components. If you have that, you have a really good foundation to get started.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Good question. Don't leave. We want to do a selfie of the group. Okay, please.
It's a very, very Indian name.
Yes.